We're back once again with the AHL show. T-Sibs, along with MGM. Just the two of us this week are going to talk to you about the AHL in Week 3 and the hot teams, the management issues, and everything else that goes on in this game. And it was an interesting week again with some teams that have had an amazing week number 3. A lot of players moving around. We're going to get to it all. First, MGM, how you doing today, buddy?
Not too bad, Sibs. How about yourself?
Not bad at all. We've got a lot of good competition going on in this league, and we've got some teams who absolutely crushed it this week, and we're going to talk a lot about them and how things are going on in general in the AHL, and a little bit about what we talked about last week with management and the perils of what goes on with that. Still a lot of chatter in the AHL Skype chat, the management chat, and a lot of guys certainly feeling the pain of losing some good players. We'll talk about that a little bit as well today. We're going to talk about player movement in general, and obviously we're seeing a lot of guys getting put on the waiver wire, but also we'll talk about trades and how that has fared in the first 3 weeks of the season. But and a couple of other things we're going to talk about are still issues with connecting on Club Challenge and of course archiving your games. And let's talk about that. The first one here, and that is for connecting to Club Challenge. Guys are still having a lot of issue with that. We're still having a problem where it's about 15 minutes past the start time of the game, where a lot of us still can't get into a room. It has just been a bit of a nightmare with NHL 17, and it has been a struggle for every GM and AGM. And thankfully, I think all of us, and you can talk to this a little bit, we all talked about trying to be understanding with each other and know that the game is screwing all of us. And I think that's worked out pretty well, where all the GMs and AGMs have been pretty good about it. Like, you tell them, hey, we're having trouble connecting. We just got dumped out of the room. They're like, yeah, we know. NHL 17 is screwing us again. And it's been pretty good that all the management folks have been, pretty understanding about it.
Exactly. I haven't had any issues with any of the other GMs about having issues. I mean, there's all sorts of problems. Guys having to restart their PlayStation in certain instances, and so far everyone's been understanding, and vice versa, right? I'm the same way. I understand what everyone's going through. I'm not going to be a dick about things.
So everyone understands. Believe me, for those of you not in management, we're all trying to work with each other on this. We're not trying to take forfeits. If we're communicating with each other, then it's okay. We're going to wait for it. We're going to get these games in. The bigger problem, of course, that we wind up having with this, MG, is that if guys have to go play for the NHL, it's going to run into their games. We're going to wind up having guys show up late for NHL games, then they may wind up coming back late for their second game that night. So it makes scheduling, you almost have to take that into consideration a little bit. It's almost worthwhile not scheduling the same lines for back-to-back games. This way you're not worried necessarily about, those guys being able to come back again. Of course, you could wind up losing other players to the NHL for that night, but this game delay and all these lags and issues that we have at NHL 17 is not just hurting the AHL, it's hurting every league, obviously, but then it's hurting players who could play in the NHL and not be able to get there in time for their games.
Yeah, exactly. And vice versa, guys that get called up to the NHL for the early game in the NHL and that are meant to play the late game in the AHL. The NHL game goes long. I mean, how long can you wait for a guy before having to ECU him?
Right.
And I mean, I guess technically the NHL isn't, by the rule book, allowed to call up guys that are playing that night in the AHL, but it's pretty hard to tell your NHL owner no if he wants to call a guy up, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, again, we're everyone in the AHL is pretty much on target with this. All the management folks trying to work together, get the games going. We won't want to play. We don't want any forfeits. I think when you start hearing guys talk about that, it's like, well, why are you playing in this league? If you're waiting to take a forfeit, what's the point?
Hmm.
And I think we have, for the most part, we've got a good group of management guys and players in general who just want to play the game.
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
how it's worked out.
Yep, I agree.
So, and of course, the other thing I mentioned was there are plenty of guys streaming games, but it's hard to go back and look at them if they're not being archived, obviously. So, just want to mention if you're streaming on Twitch, it's real simple. If you want to contact me, I mean, you could do a search online in 2 seconds, and Twitch will tell you exactly how to archive your broadcast. So, try and do that if you're streaming. They only last out there for 2 weeks, so it gives us a chance to look at these games and comment them on a little bit. There were a lot of good games that I would have liked to have seen, except that they weren't streamed or they weren't saved, and so kind of hard to go back and look at them again.
I mean,
Uh,
it's also I
Go
think
ahead.
it's also important if for them to be archived. And I had a situation this week where we played a game and we had a guy take a penalty in early in the second period.
Mhm.
Uh, on the delayed penalty, the team scored against us, but instead of the penalty being called off, our guy was still sent to the box with no power play timer up there, but still played shorthanded.
Wow.
And he stayed in the box for the entire second period, shorthanded. And obviously, we ended up losing the game. They scored, I think, 4 goals on that power play for 16 minutes of power play time. And the
Wow.
game was streamed, but he didn't have it archived, so there's um, no record of it.
Right.
If it had been archived, we could have made a case and gone back to the league and shown them that, and who knows what would have happened. But there's situations where having that game film can come in handy for other purposes as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that is a good point. I mean, you want to be able to have proof and go back and say, hey, it's another reason to stream a game. It's not just so that everyone could watch. I mean, it's also, if something happens, you want to be able to go back and have a record and say, this happened and we have proof of it and show it. And, again, we hope that people aren't trying to screw over the system and take advantage of it and are honest about things. And, it's not golf, obviously. It's not a gentleman's game, but but but
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we want to try and do the right thing if we can. But in case that doesn't happen, and you really need to show that something did happen, or maybe both teams don't know exactly what happened in a situation, you can always go back and look at it and get it resolved. So do yourself a
exactly.
favor and stream and archive your game so that you can at least go back to it.
Yep.
So let's get moving on some of the things that went on this week. We'll talk a bit about trades and comings and goings. I mean, there were plenty of moves that went on this week, but not a lot of moves that I thought were necessarily earth shattering. There was
No,
one that went on. Last week, and that was a trade between the Senators and the Bruins. And the only reason I bring it up is because one of the players in this one, Oiler 365, went on to have a phenomenal week this week, and certainly was up there in the top three in power ranking. And so the Senators traded away Gritty, Vet Marine, Fist, and those three players to the Oilers to the Bruins for Oiler, Caitlin 89, and Dangles 88. And as I said, Oiler had a very solid week this week, and back on the winning ways again, and putting some good numbers out there. But as far as I'm concerned, MG, a lot of trades that to me kind of just looks like we're trying to move players around, shuffle things up, trying to get their teams going. At least that's what it seems like to me.
yeah, you get certain guys that just aren't fitting in, and I think everyone's got certain guys that just aren't fitting in with their group, and everyone's hoping that maybe a fresh start and a different set of faces will help them just kind of fix. Maybe I think mostly it's bottom third line kind of moves. I don't think you're getting a lot of guys moving top tier talent right now.
Right. And so, this past week, of week three, we had 47 total trades. In week two, 54. Week one, we had 62. So it's going down little by little every week. And there is a certain point about week four or so, maybe five. I don't remember when the deadline is, but there will be a point where the trades are really going to come to a halt. And as we just got done talking about, I think you're starting to see a lot of those third line kind of moves. I don't know if you can anticipate a blockbuster move going on, but just judging by the management chat, I don't really see anybody who's looking to make a really big move, trying to bring in, somebody who might be a 500 team, maybe a hair over 500, looking to bring in somebody that they think is going to put their number one line over the top and get them an extra win or two a week. I don't
Hmm.
I don't know if anyone's really been talking that way. It doesn't seem that way in the management chat.
No, I mean I'd say probably the biggest trade this weekend, biggest name, would probably be with Wilkes-Barre and the Ice Caps, with the Penguins moving Kane and Pizarus for Rivers, Big Rims, and Rob 95. I thought that was probably the one of the biggest trades this weekend.
And yeah, and so
Especially for, I mean, Kane's a top line
right.
defense, and so it'll be interesting to see how Scranton comes back and how their defense holds this week, losing Kane.
Yeah, and that's always a risky proposition when your team is doing well, and and you make a trade like that, especially losing a defenseman, it could absolutely be a problem for your team if it's somebody who really bolstered the defense up. So we'll see how that works. I think WBS has done a fine job in getting themselves back on and into that playoff hunt in the East. But that's one of the things that you have to worry about is that you're making moves, and are you doing it for the right reasons? Are you upsetting any kind of chemistry that goes on in the team? And that's always the biggest problem that a GM has.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows what motivates some of these moves, right? I'm sure there's guys that are getting NHL players sent down forced onto their lineup where they have to move certain players because they're over the roster limit, or they're overloaded at certain positions because they lost one guy for one position and got sent down a guy to a different position. I would think that once a couple more weeks, I think certain teams, especially in the NHL and AHL, I mean, their fate's going to be basically they're going to know what's they're either going to be in the playoffs or they're not going to be in the playoffs, and I would imagine most trades will slow down to a crawl at that point.
Well, we'll talk more about the players themselves, but right now we can do a quick glance at the standings right now in the Eastern Atlantic. You've got Hershey, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and Springfield all tied with 34 points. As we mentioned, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton at 9-0-1 this week. Lehigh Valley a few more points back, then Bridgeport, Providence, and Hartford bringing up the rear of the Eastern Atlantic. The East North has Syracuse on a 4-game winning streak. They are up by 9 points in that division, and this one might be a little bit easier to deal with if you're Syracuse. Utica on a 3-game losing slide, 9 points back. So is St. John's, and then Albany, Toronto, Binghamton, and Rochester. Western Central has the Wolves up by 2 points over Rockford, and it looks like it's the Chicago Rockford rivalry all over again in this season. Iowa, with their 8-game winning streak, now only 4 points back of Chicago, and then 10 points further back, Milwaukee, and then Manitoba, Cleveland, Charlotte, and Grand Rapids. And Cleveland, I thought had plenty of talent, but they are struggling right now on a 3-game losing streak. They've given up 100 goals against so far this season, and that probably tells you a good part of the story right there.
Yep.
Um, in the Western Pacific, you've got the Gulls on top, 42 points over Texas. The Gulls going 9-0-1, losing their last game last week in overtime, and so they are incredibly hot team. They were on a 10-game win streak before they lost the game on Thursday. As we said, Texas now 6 points back, then San Antonio 9 points back, Bakersfield 10 back, and then we've got Tucson, Stockton, Ontario, and San Jose, who's played a little bit better this week. Still only 3-7 in the last 10, but looks like Bielski had a little bit of better week this week with his team, and so that's where we are quickly on the standings. And we'll talk a little bit more about the players, but we have obviously a couple of teams that have been incredibly hot this past week. We talked about the Pens and how they looked like they were getting a little bit better, but they absolutely went on a tear this week and have only given up 79 goals against in the league as far as what the stats are concerned. And let's hope the stats are right because none of us really know if that's the case anywhere. But
Yeah,
that's going to be a tough division, and yet they were able to put on a good win streak. And in a 9 week season, MG, this winning streak like that in 1 week, does wonders for your team.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, with 9 weeks, so I mean, it's going to be pretty hard for them to drop down far enough in the standings to get out of the playoffs. I mean, if they can clip along at even a 500 pace at this point, I'm sure their playoff spot is pretty secure.
So let's talk about those hot teams. And we mentioned the Penguins, but we also have the Iowa Wild, who also who have gone 9-0-1 in their last 10 games, 8 wins in a row, and are now 18-7, and have caught up to Rockford and Chicago. And we'll talk about the goals as well. Um, Iowa's an interesting one because they have been on an incredible hot streak, and they have gotten a lot of good offensive output and defense on their team. But they also, as a lot of guys certainly know, have solid goaltending. Their starter being Rask, who has just been phenomenal this year. 4-0 this past week, 1.67 goals against. The only problem with that is he has just been called up today to Minnesota. And so, that is one of the perils of playing so well in the AHL, MG, is that you can wind up getting called up and your team can wind up losing a key player. And this is certainly going to hurt Iowa down the road.
Definitely. I mean, Rask is a game changer of a goaltender, and losing him is going to be. I still think Iowa's got a solid enough team that it's not going to cripple them or anything, but it's definitely going to make things a lot more difficult for them going forward.
And the Pens as well, they've also gotten some hot goaltending. I want to talk about the goaltenders a little bit for both of those teams. Obviously, Rask was a big part of why they did so well this week, but Quickscope 14 went 4-0-1, .88 goals against average. He was traded from the Griffins last week. Played a few games with Detroit earlier this season, but came on with 3 shutouts this week, and just a great week for the Wild and a good week for Quickscope. And certainly, you got to anticipate that he's going to get the number one position now. So they've got those two guys, but the Pens also, MG. Really, really interesting week for them in goal. You Can't See Me and Trap MC, both ECU goaltenders this week. They both played 3 games, while Steelers fan played the other 3. DeBears 182 did not play this week, and I'm not sure what the reason is for that, um, but he was not available, and he's another solid goaltender. So to me, they've almost got like 4 great goaltenders, and certainly they've got guys that they can certainly put on the market. But You Can't See Me had 2 shutouts, 3-0, .67 goals against. He shut out the Thunderbirds and the Ice Caps this week, while Trap MC came off the IR last week and filled in as an ECU. 1.01 goals against, 3-0 for the Pens. So both of these teams got some incredibly solid goaltending and defense and some offense as well. But that's, kudos to the GMs for both the Pens and the Wild for taking a situation and bringing somebody up, or in the Pens case, 2 guys up, and getting the most they could out of them. And that's like gold when you get ECU players that are able to contribute like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of guys. I think a lot of guys haven't been maybe fully using their TC, or just maybe don't even know 100% what they have on their TC. But it's nice to see when guys can get a chance and prove what they're worth.
So, and we, one of the things that was interesting about the power rankings, if you guys got a chance to look at that, obviously you're going to see successful teams have a lot of guys up there, and the forwards, for the Wild, King Bling and Gore 71, right up there in 1 and 2 in power rankings for the Wild. Jay Nasty down in the top 10 as well. And you don't get to anybody from the Pens until you get to J Lot and Lim Park later on down the list. But that goes to show you that defense is a big part of it because, again, if you look at the defense and the power rankings, the Pens have 4 of the top 10 in power rankings. Dabble Z, Kane, as you mentioned, Ty Lee, and Agent PC. 4 guys for the Pens in the top 10 for power rankings who just had a phenomenal week, +9 for all 4 of them, and all of them going undefeated. Yeah, obviously, we're going to see these big performers up there, but I think the Pens showed that their defense uh, really got them where they needed to be this week. And the Wild did it with both, but the Pens need to do it with more defense and key goaltending than they did putting the puck in the net.
Oh, exactly. I mean, if you just look at their division there, they're sixth in their division in goals for, but number one in their division in goals against. So I mean, they're definitely doing it by close, low-scoring games, and their defense and goaltending has been a big part of that.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about these teams, the Pens and the Wild. We're going to talk shortly with Jay Lott, who is the GM for the Penguins, and we're going to be talking to S. Fick for the Wild as well as Riverdale Stomp, and we're going to be getting those guys on shortly. But I think we have Jay Lott now. So, you there, Jay?
Yep, I'm here.
So congratulations on a hell of a week. And we were just talking about your team. First, let's talk a little bit about your goaltending, and talk to us about what happened this week and how you were able to get these guys in as ECU goaltenders, and what's the future for your goaltending situation.
Yeah, this week was definitely a tricky week. I heard you talking about the Bears and how you weren't sure what really happened, and he had work around the World Series, so he really couldn't play at all. So that was kind of thrown at us. And then Sunday, Steelers got sick, so he couldn't play either. So we randomly, we put You Can't See Me in one game, and then we put Trap in another game. And, they both played very well. And then to fill in for the Bears on, Monday and Tuesday, and just to pull on 4 wins for 2 guys that really never played with us at all. And they didn't really know the defense in front of them. They didn't know anything really about us at all. And to come up and, step up and grab 4 wins like that, I mean, that was huge. As far as in the future, I mean, we still have Steelers. We still have the Bears. The tricky thing with You Can't See Me is he's one of the guys on the CHL protected list.
Ah, okay.
So, we can't even bring him up down in the future, even if we wanted to. So, at least we know we have him as a solid ECU for the rest of the regular season for the remaining games that he has. And as far as Trap, again, solid ECU. And if he ever needed to come up for whatever reason, then, it's nice that we have pretty much that third starting quality goalie that we could always turn to if we need to.
And how much have you used? See Me this year? Have you used him often, or do you have several more games with him?
Both him and Trap we've only used for the 3 games this past week. Other than that, we haven't used any ECU goalies at all.
So obviously we talked a little bit about your defense as well. You had 4 guys in the top 10 for power rankings this week for your defense. Certainly, yourself and Lim Park had a nice week as well offensively, but we were talking about how it seemed like it was more about your defense this week than it was about anything else, and timely goaltending that got you where you needed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our first week, even going into some of the second week, the season started out pretty rough for us. I think we were mainly focused on being like a complete offensive juggernaut, scoring first type of team. And it really came back and bit us, and we ended up having a losing record to start the season because of it. And even our goalies bailed us out dramatically there. So we pretty much turned into kind of more of a mix, even more towards more of a defensive type of team. Mm-hmm. And really, it's helped us out a lot. And we pretty much said, we have to stop the other teams from scoring, take away the passing lanes. And, as long as we're putting the shots on net and getting the rebounds, the goals will come. And, when they have gotten around our defense, no matter what goalie has been in net for us, they've always played huge. So right now it's just a really well-rounded group, and we're all feeling really great with each other.
Do you think that with the trade you made with Kane this weekend, do you think your defense is as good as it was before? Do you think it's better, or do you think you maybe taking a step back on defense?
Honestly, I think we're pretty much right in the same spot as where we were before. I'm not going to say, the trade, hurt us or made us better. With the return with the reverse that we got and a couple TC guys as well. It definitely helped us out regarding depth, because we did have a couple guys that got called up, like Ty Lee got called up to the NHL. Lynn Park got called up to the NHL. So we really need some guys to really, be able to step in and start helping us right away.
So we'll get to discussion about how you deal with something like that. But let's now bring in Fick and Riverdale Stomp, who are over with the Wild, and you guys also had a fantastic week this week. Fick, talk about what your team is doing differently and how you guys have been able to put together the win streak that you're on now.
Well, I feel chemistry is a big issue, and I just had them all start playing more together, and they just started to gel better, and everything has been coming together as more they play together.
Defense.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think as a goaltender and MGM's a defenseman, so obviously we're thinking defense all the time, and maybe we talk about it maybe, more than most guys would. But I think in the end, especially with the way 17 is, you need the help. Speaking as a goaltender, you need that defense in front of you, blocking shots, getting into passing lanes. I think now more than ever in 17, you need that just because of all the wild bounces that go on. So I think your point is taken. I think, you're always going to find players who can move the puck well and get something going offensively. But defense is not only more important because of this game, but it's more important because there just aren't that many good defensemen out there. And you guys have seemed to find a good chemistry with your players and good defensemen. Is that
the defensive pairings are what's helping us out, and just I think it's just total team defense in that sense, that we have forwards that back check and help their D out, especially when they're being forechecked pretty hard on the boards, or they're just being pressured. Some of these teams just kind of rush, and we just slow it down that way by just supporting our D, and especially on the breakout. When we see our defense is in a situation they need help, we have to come back, and that's kind of how we generate our offense, just off of defense. Just it's pretty simple. We simplify the game to a point where it works in our favor.
Lon, how tough is it to get guys to get defensive pairings and forward pairings together to understand what you're trying to do as far as what positioning you want them to be in, especially defensively? How tough is that to do? Is it depending on your roster and your players, or is it?
Yeah, I mean the roster and the players. I mean, most of these guys know each other, and like Steve said, it's the chemistry thing. So we've all played with each other. So when we play in clubs, our three lines that we throw out there, the reason why we're getting so many wins is because it's consistent as far as all these guys play with each other in club. So we like to keep that per game. So we like to have the same three forwards play with the same defenseman. So it's more or less, like Steve said, chemistry, and that's just kind of how the schedule unfolds for us, just where everybody's available on specific nights that we can all play with each other. It gets tough. I mean, I was on the Griffins last year, and we were unlucky. Like, we had a good team. We kind of came on strong late, but we just didn't have the availability. Like, we had two guys like, I can't play Wednesday, but I can play Thursday. I can only play Sundays. It's like, it gets tough, and I feel for some of the GMs out there that have to deal with that. So when we made this team, or when Steve made this team, we suggested players to him to get that actually had really good availability and could play the games that we wanted them to play, consistently. So that helps a lot. And our goalies have been phenomenal too. So that helps as well.
River, how important is it for you to be able to get as much time as you can with your line mates?
Very important. It's incredibly important. It's just, You go play a couple. We play a lot during the week. We play a lot during the day before the games. Some of us have work. But when we do have the time, we just usually like to play with those specific players. Like I know King and his guys, Jay Nasty and Gore, they all go play with each other. Mecca has his guys he goes and plays with. And then we all have the club that we all come back and, play occasional games here and there. But just getting a feel for the guy next to you, it's really helpful. You just feed off each other. Plus Steve and let's say Leroy, who plays with us on the first or one of our lines, they've been playing with each other for years. So I mean, Christ, I don't even know since 2010, maybe 2009. So that's just
Correct.
years of chemistry.
Yeah. It's been around 2010, 6-7
when you
years.
get some of these teams that just go after guys because of their numbers, they have no idea if they can play with another guy. They get two studs that can put up points, but then these guys just don't play well with each other because one guy needs to have the puck and he gets frustrated. He's not playing to his full potential. You get attitudes. You get a bunch of piss poor players that just want to. I'm going to quit if I don't get the puck. You get stuff we don't have any of that on this team. You have none of that on this team. Everybody's just gung-ho team.
If any of you guys found you've had to move a player off your team that maybe you probably didn't think you would have had to move, but just didn't fit in with the rest of your team or with a certain line?
Yeah, I think all the players that we had to let go so far and via trade, especially Funky Scheistel, we didn't. He's a great player. We didn't want to let him go, but the deal was for a left wing that we really liked to play on one of our lines that really had good chemistry with Mecca, and unfortunately, Funky was the odd man out in that situation, just because he was able to get us that player. But we had gotten a player in return, and I think we got Kryptonite Hero. Steve, I guess you made that trade.
Yeah,
did we get her?
Made a trade for Kryptonite Hero. She's phenomenal.
She's been fantastic, man. She's been absolutely fantastic.
All you got to do is put her with someone that knows what they're doing, and she fits right in.
And it's funny. I think that defensive pairing. The more I play this game, the more I realize how important it is for that chemistry. I mean, the forward lines. Obviously, it's a little more difficult because you've got three players, and they all really have to understand where they are. But the defensive pairing, even though it's just two players, where they position themselves and how they back each other up is incredibly important. And I think you got to find that chemistry with the different pairings right away, or else you wind up having big issues.
Well, I mean, you got certain guys that are really aggressive, and you can't pair them with another aggressive defenseman, right? You can't have two guys that are constantly pushing the forecheck. You need to find guys that can complement each other. And if one guy's aggressive, you want maybe one guy that's more stay at home defensively.
The center I think is very important too. Is the face-offs and the center that actually knows how to play the center position. To kind of be in the middle.
Defensively, center is a hugely important
absolutely.
position. Yeah,
and that's kind of how we funnel. Not that we funnel our offense through the center, as we play as a team, so it goes where the play is. But having a center that plays smart and comes back and sits in those slots and tries and watches the backdoor plays, so the forwards can actually play defense at the points. That's a huge help.
Definitely. Yeah, and I find a lot of guys center, especially the center, if they're not defensively. Some guys they get chasing or they get too caught up in trying to make an offensive play. That slot, needs to be covered by the centerman. And I think a lot of teams take advantage of centers that don't play defensive properly, and they get that cross crease pass going, and it can cost you a lot of goals.
Absolutely, it's nice to have a center like King as well who can just score at will. And play defense at the same time.
That always helps, sure. Absolutely.
So how do you guys feel about your communication with your NHL owners? Do you guys have good relationships? Do you have is there any issues, and how do you guys deal with the NHL maybe calling up certain players that?
I hate them. No, I'm just kidding. They're very good. They're pretty reasonable. They
very active.
Do what I have to do with my players, and they don't touch or mangle my roster.
Yeah, I think
so. They're pretty good.
I mean,
and that's a big part of. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's obvious that in the Skype chat there are a lot of guys who certainly have an issue with their ownership, and even talk about maybe trying to have some kind of a preseason agreement with them. do you guys feel that that's something that might be useful or even needed in the league at this point?
Yeah, but I mean, but also when you're in the AHL, you have to understand you're in the feeder club. Like
Right.
you are the AHL. You are the club that like the NHL. It's the NHL's owner's decision to make you the GM for his AHL team. So some of the players that he gets are going to play in the AHL, and like they're just going to get called up. Like, well, voila.
Absolutely.
But you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for it. So we have a lot of players that we've made trades for, or we already have on our roster in the TC that can be called up at any time and help us out, and without skipping a beat. But some teams aren't in that situation, so they're just going to sit there and complain about their owners. But there are some owners that are just going to only be there only want their NHL team to succeed. They could care less about the AHL team, and that kind of sucks. I mean, our owner's not like that, but there are owners out there. But you can't get butthurt about that. It's just what it is. I mean, in the real AHL, it's the same way in real life. So
yeah, absolutely.
This is no different than reality, even though it's a video game.
I do think though that certain owners will make promises to their AHL GMs in order to get them to take the job, and then once they do get them locked into this contract, then it's just well, screw you. I don't care what I told you before. There's nothing you can do. You want to quit, get banned for 2 seasons, right? So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's just a lot of people in this league that love it and could care less. They just want to play.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jay, you obviously had a hell of a week. You're 9-0-1 in the last 10, and there's only a stretch of 9 points between first and last in your division. Obviously, it's a pretty competitive one, and Springfield and Hershey have played incredibly well as well. Lehigh certainly has plenty of talent, and even Bridgeport is at least staying at 500 at this point. Talk about your concerns with the level of competition that you have in your own division.
Our division is definitely tough. I mean, just from last week, we definitely made an example of it. All you have to do is go on a win streak, and you can go right from the last place in the division right to tied for the top. There's definitely a lot of good players, a lot of good teams, and the division games, whenever they pop up, those are big ones that you really have to win. And for us, they've all been pretty close games, too. It's not like any blowouts or anything, so it could all go 50-50.
Vic, you have, obviously you're dealing with Chicago and Rockford, but anybody else in your division that you have a good lead on right now, but you're concerned about them being an issue later on?
See,
honestly,
Texas.
not really. I'm not
our division, but
they just lost. Oh my God, Price. He was the goalie keeping them in there with the 1-0 wins and 2-1 wins.
Right.
I think we got these guys, unless they can get new goaltending. They're gonna need a replacement.
I expected more out of Cleveland, and they're struggling so far this season. Things just aren't quite going the way they wanted to. Charlotte's made a bunch of moves and may have improved themselves, but may also be too far back to catch up to anybody. You think it's pretty much a 3-team race at this point?
As currently, yes, but there could be those sneaky teams. There's 1 or 2 trades like you were talking about earlier in the podcast, like that could just really help out one of these teams. And as soon as they get those lines figured out, they find out who plays well with each other. It's only going into the 3rd week of the season, or coming out of the 3rd week of the season. There's still some time left to get a hot team. There's been several hot teams in previous years that have come on pretty strong at the end of the season. Like Rockford, not Rockford, but Hartford, the first season, they came on pretty strong and ended up winning the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
At the expense of our Providence Bruins, which I'm not going to say actually won that series, but because of our TC issue, we had to have several forfeit wins for them. Just saying. Anyway,
I think both.
Continue
both
on.
Seasons have. I think both seasons showed that, though, right? I think both seasons we had teams. Obviously Rockford last year was from wire to wire, but Providence and a couple of other teams like Stockton early in season 1 looked like they were going to run away with it, and wound up not being there in the finals or in the semis. And I think the same thing happened in season 2 with a few teams. So it can turn around that quickly. I think, it seems that way, right?
Well, the AHL owner kind of took a lot of the players from us in Providence season 1, and sent us down like 6 AHL players, took like 6 players, and the 6 that he sent us were inactive for the playoffs.
Wow.
So we didn't have a lot of options. So we were playing games with our TC roster and knew, we didn't want to give the games up. We knew they'd have to be forfeits, but we played regardless just because we had no availability. And, but we actually, if you looked back at the scores of that series, it would have been a little different if our players were available. We probably would have went to the Cup, and I think we would have won. But that can happen. The NHL could need those players in the NHL for their playoffs and completely wreck your team. So,
do you have any ideas or any thoughts about any teams this season that maybe are flying under the radar a bit and you think might have a good push for the playoffs that maybe aren't looking to be in a playoff spot right now?
Yeah, I mean, like the Moose, the first couple weeks, the Moose play a pretty defensive style, and if they can get those guys to click with that trap style, I know Vibes is over there. I know Vibes will help them out, kind of figure that out. But if they can get on track, again, you said Cleveland. They're another sneaky team that could put up goals. There's a lot of plus players on Cleveland. It's just, can their goalie situation kind of figure itself out, or their defense plays a little stronger. I guess they could be on. It could be any. This is NHL 17. This game's been pretty rough from the start. There's going to be those lucky wins that just could help a team out towards the end of the season.
How have you guys personally found the club challenge and connecting and getting games going?
Awful.
What a pain in the ass.
That's pretty.
There was games where we've sent out invites and the other team didn't get them, and we're sitting there for like 15 minutes trying to figure out what's going on until we all realized we had to reset the lobby. No one was getting stuck or anything. It just never sent them the invite through.
How do your guys handle that? I mean, do your players, your different lines every night, do they handle it pretty well? Do you think it might throw some guys off a little bit when they have to wait? I wonder if that is a factor in some of these games. Guys getting a little frustrated, and then, they're gripping that controller a little too tight when it comes game time finally.
Well, they're competing with the VG too. So the people have VG games, right. And they'll be like, I'm available to play on 9:30 on a Sunday, and then they have to go play a VG game at 10 o'clock, and it's like, well, you got to give us a little more time because there's going to be issues. But it's as far as the connections go, the connections just have been horrid for a lot of players. But we haven't really had many issues with our team personally. But I'm sure there are issues with some players, just like, I'm done, I'm leaving, and then they bounce and they have to get an ECU, and we've all had to deal with that in the past. So it gets tough. The game could be better. Yeah,
definitely. At what point? I don't know if any of you've had to do it, but at what point do you think you would have to ask for a forfeit? At what point do you draw the line and say
we don't do forfeits?
We don't like that.
No, we'd rather reschedule till next Thursday.
Right. Or reschedule, yeah.
Yeah, we're 100% rescheduled.
We're not like that. Yeah.
Because it's for the players. Forfeits suck because then the players miss their game. They don't get their game. Like that forfeit counts as a game played, and that's not fair to the player. So as Steve's the GM. I'm actually just the captain here because I was on the no list this year. Hint, hint. But that being said, there's a lot of teams like some of these teams with poor records. They'll jump at the chance to get that forfeit win. And if they're the home team or whatever, and they don't accept it and they have the reason to, and they want to forfeit, it's up to them. But we won't accept the forfeit.
We were talking a little bit earlier about this, and MG and I were talking about how the discussions in the chat. In the Skype chat for management, it seems like most guys are pretty amicable about waiting. Understanding that the game is really an issue right now, and starting games up is a problem, and it seemed to us at least that we've gotten a lot of good cooperation, and I'm guessing for the most part you guys have had that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be. This has been one of the worst NHL games in recent memory.
Right. So,
How about sorry, Sibs,
go
but
ahead.
how about in-game play? Have you guys had any issues with just the actual gameplay when you're in a game?
I don't know, Steve. I mean, sometimes the connections are a little slow. I know Angry Dangler deals with some connection issues sometimes in club, but not really as much as in league games. But in club, I know. I don't know how their servers are worked out, but it just seems like some games he just can't. His guy's like skating, into the boards for 30 seconds and he just gets disconnected. There's that issue,
Right.
but more or less just in club, not really the challenge games.
Well, that's why he's Angry Lagger and not Angry
Yeah.
Dangler. Because he's always yelling every time he gets disconnected.
Hey, I want to talk a little bit more about the competition, especially right now with you, Jay Lott. You're dealing with Hershey, but this past week, you had a nice 3-2 victory over them, and they've been a team who obviously has been able to put up a lot of goals, and I think they may have the almost them and San Diego are up there for 1 and 2 for the most goals for in the league. What did you find about Hershey that you feel like you were able to work with and keep them to 2 goals in your game the other night?
That was honestly probably the toughest game of the week, I think. They're very good at moving the puck. They can obviously put the puck in the back of the net. So that was one of those games where it was pretty much a full-on defense first thing, and just let the goals come and just capitalize on those big chances. Like I said, they were probably the toughest team I think that we played the whole entire week, and a 3-2 victory over them. It was huge, especially when the game right before that was an 11-2 victory. So it shows you that they really can put the pressure on you and prevent you from scoring. And we just ended up capitalizing just a little bit more than them, and we pulled away with the win.
And so obviously you're gonna have more of those battles with them. Springfield also has looked to be a fairly solid team. You also had a 1-goal 3-2 victory over them this week. Talk about the difficulties of playing against the Thunderbirds this season.
Thunderbirds. Honestly, I thought that was one of the I thought that was a 4-0 shutout that we had.
Well, yeah, my records could be shit, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, that was one of You
Okay.
Can't See Me's big games that he ended up having.
Okay.
That was the night where it was the 4-0 against them and then 8-0 against St. John's. They were also honestly a great team that we played against, and it was just one of those games where we really capitalized on their chances, and they probably missed out on a couple of theirs. But again, even though it was a 4-0 game, I really feel like it was a lot closer than obviously the score shows, because they are a great team and they have a bunch of great players over there.
On the other side, for Iowa, you guys, against a pretty good Rockford team, throttled them 11-2 earlier this week on Halloween night, and then you have some close games with with Charlotte and even the shutouts. You guys are 3-0, 4-0. You're not putting up a ton of goals, but it seems like you guys come and go with maybe the competition a little bit. Do you think you're playing up or down to them, or
No, I think it's you have some of these teams that just stat pad. They put their best players against some of these teams that just aren't as lucky and don't have the record to show for it. So then you're going to have these really good players that are on top of the leaderboard that are playing these teams that are like have some lesser wins, not because they're bad teams, just because they don't have the team chemistry like some of these other teams do. But so we have all three of our lines can go up head to head with anybody. So we're going to get those games where we're going to throttle teams. Just like Rockford, that game they beat them, I guess 14-2 or 11-2 or something. I forget what the score was.
11-2, yeah.
But they didn't have their best players on the ice. Not that I'm saying those players were bad. They just went up against King and Gore and Jay Nasty, and that's not a fun thing to come up against. Like they're just gonna tear you up if you have anything open. If you give them just a little bit of space, they're just gonna rip you apart. So I'm sure they have. If they would have played up their best defensive pairing against us, it may have been a little bit tighter.
So
You know,
let's talk a little bit about that strategy and get everyone's opinion on this. When you're making up your lines for the week, and obviously I don't want you to give up everything, but you talk about that philosophy that maybe some GMs have, which is I want to try and secure victories as opposed to putting up my best guys against their best guys. You're playing some of the better teams you want to get your better lineup against, as opposed to what some guys are doing, which is like, okay, I think we're going to drop this one easily, so why put my best players up against it? Let's start with you, J Lot. What is your strategy when you're making up the lineups?
It was funny. Last season, I tried to actually do that a lot. Just trying to secure a win whenever I can, and if I wouldn't want to waste our best, guys playing against their best guys, anything like that. But this season, I've been just more of trying to even it out a little bit, spread out the scoring, and that's really what we did this week, and it really worked out. Obviously well for us. I'd rather try to be able to give ourselves the best chance to win every single game, and instead of just blowing a team out of the water one game. And then, the next game praying to God that the next line could beat the, top line. I'd rather, like I just said, try to pull a win every single time instead of, kind of almost like throwing a game.
Vic, what's your take on this?
My take is I just play everyone based on their availability. I mean, I try to keep the same guys together all the time because most of my guys are available for all 9 games.
Yeah, obviously that can be a problem too. I mean, I certainly ran into that a little bit this week as well for our team. You have availability issues. There's not much you can really do about that. But
Yeah, I'd love to have the problem where I could actually strategize where I put my lines and guys and give up more than 3 days availability.
Yeah.
Balance is huge. It's definitely huge.
It's also good to have I guess you could say a relationship with your teammates.
Right.
They all agree on things, and you ask them what they want, and they give you what they want, and you get them what they want, basically.
Hey, one more big question for you guys, and again, MGM and I were talking a little bit about that, and that is, player movement. Trades have gone down a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but still we're up around 50, 55 trades a week, and certainly a lot of guys are being put out on waivers, whatnot. At what point do you feel like you want to let the team settle in? Obviously, it's only a 9-week season, and things have to click, or else you're in trouble right away. But there's got to be a point, I think, where you want to just let these guys settle in and play, and not worry about whether or not they're getting moved.
When's the trade deadline? Is that week 6 or week 5? Week 6, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I guess that's really your answer right there. Is just when that trade deadline's about to end. I mean, but that's the week that everybody moves, like in previous seasons. It's I don't know. I mean, like I said, there really hasn't been a lot of trades recently, like groundbreaking trades, but there will be. Give it a couple weeks. It's still early in the season.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Just because I think it's I think you're kind of weighing. Yeah, we want to still get players that we possibly can get to help us out, but again, it's much like regular sports. When do obviously after the trade deadline's over, everybody relaxes a little bit, but do you try and get your team and your lines a little bit more of security by not moving, not waiting for the trade deadline, but maybe stopping at some point before that? Yeah, I mean I mean obviously it's a tough thing to gauge, because you don't know if somebody comes on the market all of a sudden, you might somebody that you really could use, you want to try and make that deal if you can, but I'm just asking if you think it affects players in the long run if they have to keep on worrying about it.
Yeah, I mean you have to do what's best for the team. I mean, if that one player that's available that you really feel like is going to help your team out, I mean, I guess Steve as the GM, he has to make that decision. I mean, it's tough sometimes. It's not easy because then you have to send a message out. That person gets upset. They delete you from their friends list, and
yeah,
you don't want anybody to not be your friend anymore because of it. But sometimes you got to send some people down to the TC that you don't want to, and That's the toughest part of being a GM. Is
Yeah,
is,
you could lose
is
your best friend over it.
yeah, you could lose your
Good
friends.
friend
You
of
know, I mean,
yours over it.
people get hurt by that. And they put a lot of time and effort in the game, and when they're taken away from a team they really liked, it's tough to. Then they have to go to another team, and they may not like their situation, or it turns out they like their situation. I'm sure it goes, vice versa. But you just have to control people's emotions too as a GM, and that can't be easy. It's not easy sometimes.
No, absolutely not.
Listen, guys, I appreciate you coming on with us, Jay Lott, Fick, and Riverdale Stop. Congratulations on a really solid week for all three of you, and good luck
Thanks.
the rest of the way. Well, I'm sure we'll talk to you down the line.
Thanks,
All right,
buddy.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yep, sounds
Thanks
good.
a lot.
Yeah, good luck. I'll see you tonight, J Lot.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah.
It's about time for everybody to get on and practice, so we're going to cut away to MG. Any last thoughts going into week 4?
No, just good luck to everybody, and hope it's a better week for me this week than it was last week.
I think we all kind of feel like that, unless you're one of these 3 other guys who went undefeated. Again, thanks a lot to you guys for joining us, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That's it for this week's show. I'm T. Sibbs, and we're all getting ready now to get some practice in before week 4 starts up. Again, thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you again next week.